No.
We will proceed with care and with caution, particularly with the first subject. And as you'll have seen this week and has been widely discussed, Oisin Murphy has been charged with a couple of offences by Thames Valley Police for an incident earlier this year in which he has been charged with drink driving and also failing to give a sample at the roadside. Jane, George, Cornelius, clearly we have to deal with these subjects with the requisite sensitivity and mindful of the fact that there's an ongoing case, so can't mention the specifics of the case. But here is somebody who has had significant issues with alcohol in the past. They're well documented. He had conditions to his licence for some time, and there seem to be varying opinions as to how the sport should treat him, deal with him, embrace him, reject him. However, Jane, you've already taken to social media on this. What's your view? Well, my view is, first, I'm not going to comment on the case. Nobody knows the facts and the police are dealing with it, and that's the way it should be. But from a more human level, I just do feel that, you know, Oisin is a wonderful guy. He is an absolute superstar. He has battled with demons, as you say, for some years. And all jockeys, flat and national hunt, risk their lives for us every time they get on a horse, sometimes several times a day, and we can't possibly understand the pressures that they're under, and especially with Oisin, who, you know, is fighting demons, and sometimes the demons might win. And I just feel that we all ought to have a little bit of understanding and empathy around this this case for him. And on top of anything else, you know, it didn't happen on a racecourse. It wasn't anywhere near a horse. This is his private life, and it's nothing really to do with us or anybody else except him and the police. And George, there are those who say, well, how many chances does the sport give someone to get their act together?
I think the key here, Nick, is Oisin. He's a great guy. I get on very well with him. As a sport, we love him. It's down to him. That's really the way forward. You know, he's had a lot of chances, and please God, the sport gives him many more. He's got some very good people around him, but the one person who's going to work this out is Oisin Murphy, and he just needs to talk to the right people and work it out, and I'm pretty confident he will. Cornelius?
Nothing really to add. He's going to be in court in Reading midweek, and we'll see what happens from there. It's been well discussed all week. I'm sure it will continue to be. We will leave it there for the moment. Simon Micholidis has been the Chief Customer Officer of Great British Racing. He sort of took over running British Racing's marketing arm when Rod Street left, though the roles weren't exactly the same. It was supposed to be an interim role, and he is going to see it through and work out his notice. But he's taken up a new job elsewhere as the CEO of one of the key sort of brand organisations, the sort of trade body, if you like. So he is leaving another void, another vacancy of racing's another vacancy in the higher echelons of racing. We'll come on to Lord Allen in a second, but yeah, it seems that you know, some of the time one thinks, you know, are people looking at these jobs, on the face of it, they look attractive, and then maybe finding that it's just too hard or whatever. But this is this is an important gap in the upper echelons, because, you know, racing as a sport to promote itself, as an industry, as a product to promote itself, is not achieving what it would like to be doing at the moment. And somebody like this guy was very well placed to help out on that front. I think he started as an interim filler of the role, didn't he? And then I think the feeling was he would, he'd then take on the role and hopefully for a reasonable length of time. That's not going to be. But these, you know, obviously it's important who's the chair of the British Horse Racing Authority, who's the chief executive, who've got some of these other jobs. But even if Micholidis wasn't exactly the best known person around, that area in which he works is absolutely crucial. And so this is a really big vacancy.
He's been responsible, Jane, for this £3.6 million campaign. The going is good. How well are we marketing the sport? Well,
you know, I don't know him, and I wish him well in his new career, but I think it's, you know, a timely change. I think £3.6 million is quite a lot of money. I wasn't particularly impressed with it, especially if I put it alongside the campaign that Ascot did, which was superb and actually focused on all sorts of really relevant points to racing to entice other people into the sport that might not even, have thought of it before. So the budget's there. That should entice somebody from the industry. I'm talking about the marketing and branding industry rather than the racing industry, into coming up with something which will absolutely blow our socks off, and I'm looking forward to it because I think there's a huge improvement to be had.
Yeah, we're always to blow our socks off.
Yeah.
But we're always told that racing has no money.
Yeah, but 3.6 million is quite a lot of money.
So they ought to be able to pay for somebody good. That's the point.
There are quite a lot of people earning plenty of money, so there's in various roles.
Exactly that. I just feel, OK, this has happened. Where there is a change, there's an opportunity.
We've spoken about racing's governance on this show before.
Yes,
as we move into, I mean, Lord Allen takes up his annual weekly position on the list at the moment, because we're still waiting to see whether he's going to take his post as chair of the BHA. He's clearly ruffling a few feathers. He clearly has a very clear idea as to what he wants the governance structure to be. Do you think the sport is all going to get together and shelve in line and enable him to take up his post?
What I would say is I thought Lord Allen was a very good appointment when it was announced. And further, it's quite unusual to accept an appointment and for it to be announced publicly, and then for you to sort of, say, well, I'm not taking it up at the moment until X, Y, Z is done. But they think that's quite an interesting play. The governance has to change. I'm pretty certain that he's thinking the governance has to change. And if he wants to play the card this way, I think that's a really good power move, frankly, because the problem with the governance as it stands is that everybody is self-interested. All the stakeholders feel that they're the most important.
Yeah.
All of the stakeholders are important, but you can't just sit there saying we want this and we're going to veto everything unless we get this. Then you're in a stalemate, which is where racing has been for X number of years, and it's lacked. And I'm just going to come out. It's lacked strong leadership for at least 4 years. Certainly from the time that I've sort of re-immersed myself back into the sport, it's been a bit woeful. So I think that if this works, that would be very interesting, and I would urge everyone to get behind him, because we need some strong leadership, and that needs a change of governance.
It sounds like most of the stakeholders are now lining up behind him. It sounds as though the Jockey Club are lining up, the large indies, most of the areas of the NTF, certainly. Not sure about the owners.
I think, Jane said it all there, but we've all been so frustrated, those of us on the shop floor, frustrated by the battles between the vested interests, the lack of leadership, the lack of coordinated leadership. There were some brilliant people involved, but they all have their vested interests, and they're not good at getting behind a closed door and sitting around a big table and talking about it. And if Lord Allen he's putting a lot of feet to the fire, perhaps, really hope so. I tried to catch up with him at Ascot, and he sadly disappeared through a door and didn't come back out of it. But listen, he saw what was about to happen.
Is this like your wife? He turned around and said, I'm sorry, I have absolutely no idea
who you are.
Literally
quite rightly.
no idea.
Literally never seen you before in my life.
And then he'll have to live with you for the next 20 years.
And then I went off and won the Woking, so I didn't give a damn. But no, genuinely, I think those of us on the shop floor, and I know sometimes it's easy to shout from the outside when you're not immersed, and Rafe Beckett actually picked me up on this point, because I'm quite good at sort of having an attitude, having an opinion, and not actually getting involved. And a lot of that is actually because there's a deep frustration that getting involved doesn't actually get us anywhere. I would love to be in a position where we have a coordinated structure of people involved who we all want to talk to, and we all want to talk collaboratively for the greater good. Now, it's probably pie in the sky, but we are all hopefully moving towards the greater good of the sport, but at times it doesn't feel like that.
I mean, clearly control of the fixture list is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
or some level of control over the fixture list.
It's got to be on the list of things that need to be resolved, that is for sure. And the other thing is, you need somebody who's sort of speaking as one voice, leading the sport in negotiations with central government. That's the other thing. Whilst they're not going to take the slightest bit of notice of some fractured sport that can't even get their act together at their own level. But you know, if we actually manage to pull that together and actually go and attack central government, we can sort all sorts of gambling issues out, all sorts of tote issues out, all sorts of tote issues. Well, I mean, you know, maybe we can get a sort of French type situation going on, which I think would be very healthy for owners. You know, it needs a strong leader, and I'm very interested in the way that Lord Allen's playing it. And hopefully we'll get a very, very good CEO who is like the Rottweiler that pulls everyone together and takes them forward. Because if we don't, we're in a bit of hot water.
We're in a lot of hot water at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah.
And the metaphorical banging on the table is apparently taking place sort of behind the scenes, not quite for everybody to see. But what he's doing is, it's regardless of what comes out of it, it's so encouraging that somebody's actually doing something.
Well,
and or apparently,
unless he ends up saying, well, I can't get an agreement and I walk away. What happens then?
So that is the massive drama. If it's not some bluff and he says, right, I'm off, you can, you know, sod you lot.
That's the roll of the dice. You know, he's put an ultimatum down. I'm guessing, who knows? None of us know what's going on behind closed doors, and it's right, it should be behind closed doors, by the way. But, you know, if he's saying, look, either this happens or I'm not taking up the role, when you put an ultimatum down when you're in that position, you have to be prepared with the consequences. And if they say, well, we're not doing it, he'll walk. And, you know, and then what? You know, we have no CEO, we have no chair, we've lost the marketing.
We have an acting CEO at the moment.
We've got an acting. Sorry, I didn't mean to be disrespectful. Sorry, but you know, with no permanent position in place, and you need them to be in place in order to, you know, God help us, I hope they don't come in place and then say, all right, I need 2 years to do a review and a strategy and a this and a that.
I want to go around talking to people.
I want to go and talk to people, and you know, we've done all of that. We've had endless committees.
Yeah, Jim Mullen, the new Jockey Club CEO.
Exactly, he's a good hire.
He said in the interview I did with him the other day, he said, if he takes up his post, if Lord Allen takes up his post, he's the kind of guy that gets his umbrella up on the hook and gets behind the desk and starts doing stuff.
He did great things in the construction industry.
Did he?
With when he as chair of Balfour Beatty.
Okay.
I think it's Balfour Beatty.
Got stuff done.
Yeah, I got stuff done. Changed the company.
And you said you thought Jim Mullen was a good appointment.
I think Jim Mullen is a good appointment.
Why?
Yeah. I think Jim will be a breath of fresh air in that position. I think he has a very good reputation. The members are behind him, which is important. And I think it'll be very. I'm looking forward to the next Jockey Club meeting, which is in July.
Because were you the latest intake of Jockey Club members?
Yes.
How have you found it so far?
Well, thank goodness they made me a member before they witnessed me on ITV a couple of weeks ago.
That's what they want, isn't it? They want passion for the sport. We need skin in the game and all that. Yeah.
So I'm still sort of, you know,
feeling your way.
Feeling my way a bit. I did ask a few questions at the first meeting, and you know, sort of. I thought they were just sort of fairly ordinary questions, but it raised a couple of eyebrows. So we'll just have to. Have to.
Without betraying any confidences.
Oh, go on.
What were your?
Oh no, they weren't. No, it was. I'm making a thing out of it that's not a thing. It was.
But what would be your if you're in that environment? What things preoccupy you the most?
Well, I sort of slightly approached it as I would as a CEO, to just ask about numbers and that sort of thing. So that's always the base from where you spring from. Probably not realising the confidentiality of some of that information in an open meeting. But it was funny because I was invited, David and I were invited to somebody's house for dinner later that night, and it was quite a big party just 5 minutes down the road from us. And our hosts were greeting everyone as they were parking their cars and coming in. And one of my fellow Jockey Club members said, I'd have been here half an hour earlier, but some woman kept asking questions.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Keep asking the questions.
Sorry about that.
You have to keep asking the questions.
But, you know, what is so great about the Jockey Club, actually, is everybody that I've met there, they have a burning passion and they feel responsible for the future of racing. And it's brilliant that they're there, sitting there, guiding us, to be honest.
So if you've got 100 and however many people, it was 160 or 200 odd people who care much, then...
They care and they invest, and they invest intellectually, emotionally, and in some instances financially. And, you know, it should be treasured rather than abused.
OK, let's press on. Paul Cole has announced his intention to stand back from the trainer's licence. He'll kick on to the end of the season, then it'll be the preserve exclusively of his son, Oliver, who shared the trainer's licence for a number of years. And Cornelius, you and I spoke about this on the podcast the other day. Fond memories of Paul's career, particularly generous, the brilliant dual Derby winner.
Yeah, and one forgets that period sort of from the end of the 80s to for about 10 years. He was one of the absolute number one. He was
champion trainer, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah. Going to Royal Ascot and winning 3 two-year-old races at that stage. But Generous was the horse, and Generous turned out to be absolutely magnificent. But there were plenty of other ones at the time, and he had the backing of Prince Fahd Salman, who's now a name from yesteryear, but with completely green colours, shiny green colours. He was a very big player at that point, and yeah, he's a character who has been very much part of flat racing in this country for an extremely long time. He started, I think we said he started with 11 horses training in Upper Lambourne, sort of the end of the 1960s, probably about the same kind of
And he owned half of them himself.
Well, absolutely, about the same sort of time that Barry Hills was landing his gamble and getting his operation going. So very much part of the whole thing. Quite a very tall figure, occasionally quite a distant figure as well, but a very talented one too.
Yes. Aside from generous horses like Snurge, who became the first maiden to win a classic when he won the Ledger. Mr. Dinos, brilliant winner of the Gold Cup. Knights Baroness, very talented filly. Ibn Bay, who was second in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I know all the Americans were making fun of him, saying, "Who is this Paul Cole?" And he goes and finishes second in the Breeders' Cup Classic. George, you'll have known it. You'll know Paul very well.
Know Paul very well. Know Ollie very well, and Alex. Great family. We've had some good battles on the tennis court as well.
Paul's very good, isn't he? Is he better than you?
Good. Oh, God, that's not hard. We've had a good, lovely family. You know, we talk about the Hills dynasty. There's a Cole dynasty forming as well. You know, Ollie's doing tremendously well. They're a great team. And I think even sort of since perhaps what they might have called the glory days, they still buy very good horses. You know, you look at some of the horses they've bought, probably with less firepower, and obviously Fahd Salman's death was massive. But
big support now of Jim Hay.
And they buy just a lovely type of horse. It's the type of horse I love. I love the Cole type of horse.
What is that type of horse, George?
It's a slightly old-fashioned horse, I think. It's a sort of bigger type of horse. It's not sort of, maybe perhaps back in the early 90s, maybe those whippety two-year-olds that they did so brilliantly with, but they seem to have evolved into I don't know. They buy a nice type of horse, and that is a gift that Paul has and has obviously passed on to his children.
And we were talking earlier on in the programme about Barry and Penny, the husband and wife partnership. Paul and the late Vanessa absolutely, absolutely another rock solid partnership. And the late Vanessa was very much, you know, part of the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about Prince Fahd Salman, that early Saudi Arabian involvement in racing, and of course Prince Fahd very closely related to Khaled Abdullah. To what extent do you think that influenced what we're now seeing?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Saudis love their racing, and we're seeing the new generation of young Saudis getting heavily involved in racing. His Royal Highness Prince Faisal and the Thoroughbred Racing Corporation have bought some lovely horses.
the old green and white, the old colours of Royal Anthem and Oath.
Yeah,
and all those,
and you know, that investment is starting to show itself on the racetrack now, and it's wonderful that we have that support in this country, and that they support British racing.
But however big and powerful any kind of potentate is that comes into the sport, they're unlikely to get the better of Aiden O'Brien and Ryan Moore. 150 Group 1s together yesterday, courtesy of World. That is just a monumental milestone, George, isn't it?
It's incredible. When we were talking outside before we came in here, I didn't know who Aiden Ryan was, who'd ridden 150 winners. But this is incredible. And they are an incredible team. And those of us who are battling against them aspire to just catch on to their coattails occasionally. The firepower, Ryan, extraordinary. I mean, he is riding at the top of his game, and there was a while back when he had a little bit of a blip, and I think a few people were
there was
a lot of people saying, and now you just, and obviously you're on the good horses, and sometimes the good horses will get you out of trouble, but just consistently he gets the job done on these incredible horses.
When you're an owner and you go into a stakes race with a horse and there's a Ballydoyle horse in there, what do you think?
I think, well, we could finish second. Look, we enter races that we think we can win, otherwise we wouldn't enter them. But if you're in a stakes race, there's usually a Ballydoyle horse, and you've got to take your chances. But what they have achieved is unbelievable. And, you know, on top of that, Aiden and Ryan both are the nicest, most modest people you could ever come across. And I'm absolutely... has anybody else ever done it? A trainer-jockey combination?
150 Group 1s.
I don't know.
It is absolutely remarkable. And I think it's that longevity, isn't it? Everyone knows Aiden is the hardest of taskmasters. You know, he's someone who demands standards that most of us can't even kind of... Well, you might be able to in your business, but I can't fathom. And he's lasted. That's the thing. He's lasted that long in the role. And he's intelligent. He's professional. He's respected. He's clearly got great backing. But it's not just that. You know, it's not just a money thing. This is he is a man at the absolute top of his game, and probably for the next 20 years. But you look at the previous incumbents of that role, and Christy Roach, Mick Kinnan, Kieran Fallon, Johnny Murtagh, Joseph himself. But to eclipse all of those in terms of amount of Group 1 winners ridden and length of time in the role, that's a remarkable thing. It is absolutely unbelievably. It might be 151 this afternoon at the Curragh with Lambourne. Lots been said about the shape and makeup of the card for the Irish Derby today. It's big, it's long, a lot of runners, a lot of handicaps. It's very good in terms of generating money for Whirlpool. We had the same debate after the Derby at Epsom and the shape of that card and how you marry best the interests of international punters and trying to get as much revenue in, and it could be up to €1 million possibly this afternoon, with providing a card with sufficient kind of diversity and balance and variety for the paying public and those watching on domestic television. George, I wanted to come to you because it was something we talked about after the Derby at Epsom. Obviously, you're balancing a lot of interests here, and it's a delicate one. It's a delicate one, but I think what is important is that Epsom and the Jockey Club and the great guys involved there, Brian Fitch as the chairman, Jim Allen and the whole team there, they're really engaged in this. They're fully aware. They're not putting their head in the sand. They hear the noise. I've been there for 4 months and I see the noise, but I also see the potential. And I think that, you know, glass is half full sometimes in my life is the only way to go, because you're a racehorse trainer and you have to be optimistic. But I am very optimistic for that place. I'm optimistic for the people. I know Jim Allen has said to, I think you yesterday, Cornelius, there are things going on in the background. There might have to be quite a lot of radical change, whether it's to what goes on around the Derby. The Derby itself, we touched on it earlier, the race itself was magnificent, wonderfully competitive, drew us all in for days in advance. But driving across those downs in the lead up to the meeting and then actually on the day itself, and you think, it's missing something here. But something can be done. It hasn't gone. It can come back. And we just need everyone in the area to go, when is the Derby happening? And then we will get people back. Yeah. And it's that recognition of its actual existence that's the sort of fundamental first, isn't it?
And, you know, you go to Cheltenham, and to an extent to Aintree as well during those big events, and all around people are talking. There are shop windows that are talking about the Derby, there are banners or whatever it is. With Epsom isn't just consumed, Epsom and Ewell, that district, isn't consumed by the Derby in the way that other events are, and that's a real pity. But it's something to in a way. It's something just to it's not that hard to work on that and try and turn that round.
Coming back to the shape of the card itself, Jane, I mean, to what extent do you think, you know, what you're putting on outside the main event is a real driver in actually burnishing the whole?
I think it's firstly, I would say, should we bring it back to Wednesday? And
our Derby? Yeah,
and make a big deal of it. But I think that's a good idea. But you've got to look at this is the 21st century. You know, young people have many other, you know, younger people or people that are not immersed in racing. There's many things that they can do. The whole thing has evolved. The whole thing about entertainment has evolved. And we shouldn't forget that racing, especially the Derby, is a day of entertainment. It's as well as the race. And it just seems to me that we've forgotten that. And, you know, should there be a big concert on in the evening that's part of the ticket? There's all sorts of other things that we should do.
Certainly shouldn't sneer at concerts, which lots of people do.
Right, yeah, definitely. There's so many things you can do to make it an unmissable day that includes the race, and the race being the highlight of it, but actually something's got to happen.
Yeah, can I just, I had a bit of communication with Andrew Cooper immediately afterwards, and we went to a point-to-point locally from home. There were very few runners, three-runner races, a match, a walkover. Huge crowd, but it was just stripped back, basic fun. A big beer tent with people meeting up with their mates, a country fair. And
you think you could replicate that?
I don't know. I mentioned it
infield.
Andrew liked the idea. I'm not saying we're going to. Andrew. Yeah,
this is the Godstone point-to-point, is it?
This was a Parham. Down locally to us. But it was just a really good, fun day. And people were watching the racing and they were having a bet, but they were having a drink with their mates under a sort of not very smart tent, but they were loving the day out. And Epsom on the Downs didn't have that feel at all. It had a bit of a fun fair and a bit of a sort of a slightly exclusive area where you paid a bit more to go on the hill, which used to be apparently completely free. They now have a sort of area where you can go on, you have to pay a bit more for entertainments. But there wasn't the feel of the Parham point-to-point. And I think Andrew quite liked the idea of just stripping it back, just to basic fun, creating a country fair, a point-to-point
on the infield.
And just...
Well, Jim Allen, who's now tasked with the job of general manager, he was racing at Windsor yesterday, and he had a horse called Cinderella Man that he bought for 1,000 guineas, that's run twice now and been third and fourth. And so I think it's trained by Pat Phelan, who also had a winner on the card, and Jim accepted the trophy on Pat's behalf. But what he was using the analogy, because people were talking to him about, you know, we're a fortnight on, but it is the big talking point as we're demonstrating now. He used the analogy the analogy was used, you know, you don't necessarily want to take on the role of a thriving pub. You want a pub that's just a little bit on the back foot. And he says he's got lots of ideas. Wednesday is definitely one of the thoughts, but other days of the week are definitely part of the thinking process as well. And I think he sort of emphasised, you know, not everyone is going to like what we're going to come up with, but. You know, this is racing in 2025. Exactly. It's not racing in 1780 anymore.
And I think from the... Sorry.
No, go on.
But from the perspective of an owner, we had a runner on Derby Day. Serona ran, actually. Didn't cope with the course, but finished well. And, you know, from our experience as an owner, it was OK, right? And then the next day we had a runner at Goodwood, just an ordinary, you know, meeting at Goodwood. And we had the most fabulous day. Lots of things happening, lots of things to do. Willie Carson came with David and I, and Willie and I shared a bottle of wine at lunch and ended up accidentally buying a cellar, a 5-furlong cellar. Which
you bought the winner of the cellar?
We did.
What, were you swiping a wasp away?
We did, and I mention it because I feel very guilty that I didn't mention my other trainer, Charlie Clover, who is training my 5-furlong cellar.
What possessed you to buy the winner of the cellar?
Half a bottle of wine. And Willie...
Where's the wine?
Poor old David was, you know, oh my goodness. And Willie and I were just egging each other on. No, go on, you do it. No, go on, you do it. So in the end, we did it.
Brilliant. Well, we've played fast and loose with the clock this week, probably more than ever. But I hope you enjoyed that. Those were this week's Talking Points.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.